Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brad Miller, and this is the Chronically Human podcast, where we have discussions aimed at creating a better world with more individual freedom and less unnecessary suffering. Today, our guest is David Marinac. He is the owner and CEO of ABC Packaging Direct, and you can find their line of products at standuppouches.net. David and I talk about marketing, sales, and motivation in the modern age. David is an extremely positive guy who has a lot of great information to share about finding success in life and in business. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Welcome to the show, David.
Good to be here, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Yep, and I got your name from Daryl Bouchard with RealSalt.com. He was on episode 20 here on the Chronically Human podcast, and we had a fantastic conversation about the free market, about innovation, and about health and wellness, and about how businesses can be a force of good, not only for the people who own the business, but for employees, for customers, and the community at large. And when I asked him for a name, a referral, a recommendation to have on the podcast, he gave me your name.
Well, he's a good dude. Second of all, they really do believe that. I don't know if you've had a chance to follow up anything with Redmond, which is the parent holding company of Real Salt. They really and truly do walk the talk. They really have a philosophy, regardless of whether you're out in the boonies where they mine the salt, or you're in their Heber City, Utah location where they actually have a lot more of the marketing and the accounting and the real nuts and bolts of the business. But every single one of those people there that I've met over the years, I'll tell you, Brad, really love being there. They really do support their employees. It's a really cool vibe.
And the more I dug into their company, the more I was impressed by that, what you're talking about. And to hear, you've had boots on the ground, so to speak, there and met
Right.
them. And I can really see how through Daryl and his enthusiasm and through his attitude towards, life in general, that it really does
Correct.
infuse their products and how they run their business.
Well, the other thing that's cool too is as a supplier of theirs, and I'm not blowing smoke. I mean, they really are fair. They really believe in forming partnerships with their suppliers. That's kind of how we met. We weren't doing any business together, and I invited him onto my podcast, ironically. And then it was sort of, we became friends, and it was one of those, hey, come on out and see us sometime, and maybe we can work together. And the more we kind of got together, the more there was a synergy of what was that we do versus what they do and what they need. And I just love the fact in this day and age, they really do value the partnership relationship with their suppliers, where it's not all a one-sided thing. It's not that they save all the money and we get nickel and dimed. It's just a whole different ballgame. So it's quite refreshing, to be honest.
And I think that's a great way to do business, because my brother, he owns a couple businesses, and he talks about that it is a partnership. That when
Right.
a lot of times they'll talk about in the economy vendors or suppliers, but in reality that when you work with another company and you share their values and that you're in the trenches with them, so to speak, that you are really a
Correct.
partner with them.
Yeah, and it's not rocket science. It's that old golden rule, how do you want to be treated, and treat others the way you want to be treated. And they really believe it. And it's been a great example for us, because they're really at the cutting edge of employee recognition and making sure that their employees have the time they need to spend with their families. And somebody's sick, hey, let's all rally behind so and so and make sure that they're supported and do their job, and all those other kind of little things. It's not rocket science, and they really do walk the talk. It's pretty cool.
That's great. And the partnership that you have with them, is that with your stand-up pouches? Is that correct?
It is. Stand-up pouches, I'm in the packaging business. And packaging, of course, Brad, is a massive industry. You've got everything from, corrugated boxes to bubble wrap to tissue paper. And we've always been in the packaging business, almost 30 years now. But back in '06, '07, we kind of morphed into, or kind of broke off a branch to develop our own online brand, if you will, which was stand-up pouches. And stand-up pouches are very much what you're familiar with when you buy your pound of coffee or your protein powder or trail mix, whatever it may be in those pouches that you see in the grocery store. That's kind of what we started to get into. And we really did out of desperation more than anything else. Packaging business in 07, 08 was, and of course, just like the entire economy here in the U.S., was really struggling. I mean, we had a lot of companies that were stretching out their payments or had no business paying or had no desire to pay their bills. We really had to find a niche. And the niche we found at that time was there were a lot of companies that wanted to sell at the up and coming retailers like Whole Foods, or of course Walmart had been around, but to be able to get a product or your packaging on those store shelves, unless you were a Procter and Gamble or a Nestle's or the really big guys, you couldn't compete. And then you had Whole Foods, and then you had Earth Fare, and you had some other smaller retailers that were accepting of the smaller brands. And these smaller brands needed packaging that could compete with the big boys. And what we found at the time, Brad, was a niche in the fact that there were very few companies here that were willing to run small volume, high quality, but very small quantity at the time of these, what's known as a stand-up pouch. So from there, we really sort of branched off on our own little target. I mean, when I say small volume, we're running, 5,000 pieces, where at the time, the minimum run normally in the U.S. was about 30 or 40,000 pieces.
Wow.
So we really sort of branched off into a little niche and found a way to kind of eliminate competition, but at the same time make a couple of bucks too. So that's really the stand-up pouches in a nutshell to kind of go in that direction for our time here.
Yeah, that's great. And we do support what we believe here at the Chronically Human podcast is that the free market is one of the greatest inventions that humankind has ever created, where basically it's about peaceful transactions, peaceful exchange between individuals, whether it's, at the company level or just between individuals buying and selling things. And so the idea that you found a niche like that and you're able to innovate and take advantage of that it's not really stealing customers as much as creating a bigger pie that everybody can eventually eat from, if you will, because stand-up pouches,
right.
They don't just affect the businesses that you deal with, but it's also the consumer end as well and the economy in general.
Correct. Yeah, without this at the time, there really, a lot of those smaller brands, they could compete on their product. They had great products, but they couldn't even stand on a store shelf next to these bigger guys because, let's face it, on a consumer or a retail level, Brad, you're dealing with you have about 3 seconds to grab that consumer's attention when they're walking down the aisle. Let's face it, they're looking at the packaging going like, should I pick it up or should I keep walking? And the fact that we were able to kind of help them get on a store shelf and be able to look at the packaging, side by side with the bigger brands really brought them, and elevated them onto a different level. And we were quite, obviously gratified to see these products on the store shelf and be able to kind of grow from there.
And you talked about going online in the 2007, 2008 market. I know personally with my brother and his business, that was a terrible time. You talk about people extending payments out and not wanting to pay. And I think that's
Correct.
a real challenge that people who don't own businesses or know somebody personally who does, that's a huge issue with especially businesses now with terms of 90 days or even more with paying their bills.
And it's not going to go away unless there's really a concerted, consistent plan. And let me explain for a second. One of the things that I found over the years is, an accountant told me this a long time ago, people won't pay their bills not because they're mean or nasty, it's just that they can't. And whatever has happened, they just can't at that time. Now, we could either decide to allow that to go on, and eventually people take advantage of that. It's human nature. Hey, well, you know what? He's okay at 30 days. Make it 45. Well, 45 turns into 60, and 60 turns into 90. And we had to really decide as a small business, and really had to focus that we couldn't afford to be someone's bank. And we couldn't afford to just allow those terms. So regardless of the size of the company, we had to have a strong, firm understanding of how we were going to handle the payment terms. And we don't, and again, it's important to build the relationship. But like we initially said at the very beginning, it's a partnership. And I want to make sure that it's a two-way street. So when we're dealing with somebody and we're providing value on them, we clearly state that we expect to be paid X. And we're willing to work with our customers. We're willing to kind of get down there. It's not a tried and true set in stone, but you have to be able to, as a business owner, you have to be able to get that cash. If you don't have that, then you're quickly going to find yourself spinning out of control. And whether it's your brother and his businesses or our business, we've seen over the years how quickly that can just it's not one customer, now it's two, now it's three, now you're behind, now you're not able to make your payment or whatever it may be for the bank or whatever, and it can spiral out of control. So that's where you have to have kind of a tried and true kind of plan or a method to make sure that everybody understands the philosophy, if you will.
Definitely. And the way that you guys presented yourself online at the time to really separate yourself as a niche brand, you guys you produced ebooks as well, that I think is a
Correct.
really great marketing tool, as well as you did a podcast, Ditch the Boxes, right, which I've listened to several episodes, and those have a lot of great content in it.
Well, and the whole philosophy at that time, and it's still part of our niche, but at that time we wanted to kind of really spread the word about what it is we were able to do. And that back to that stand-up pouches world where, but a lot of people we knew, and an old friend of mine, another guy you may want to talk about someday down the road, an old friend of mine, Marcus Sheridan, who's big online, and I've met him over the years. And as far as he's got a company called, I believe, the Sales Lion, and he started a company in the, believe it or not, in the in-ground pool business. But long and short, he started blogging to save his business, and he was in the pool business at the time. And what he started doing was he had a philosophy that everybody has questions about your business, whether it's your business, my business, his business, whatever. And he said it's imperative that we take the time to listen to the questions that our customers ask, and then blog about it, video about it, ebook about it, whatever we can to kind of spread the word about our business. So, for example, we had a lot of people that would ask us, how many colors can I get a stand-up pouch made or printed? How long does it take? How do you control quality? How can I get a Ziploc and a tear notch? Does that cost? What are these? All those things. There's probably about 50 to 100 questions that we just started to blog about, and then we collected them into an ebook. And then we would video and do videos about those things, because the whole idea for us was about educating our customers and educating people about what's possible. And at the time, so few companies had any clue that they could run small volume of a stand-up pouch. So we had to really blaze that trail and really let people know that this is even possible. So a lot of that blogging and videoing and all that stuff, the podcast, was about trying to make sure that we alerted people that this is available. And then, a lot of the podcast was about really recognizing customers and people, and a lot of them weren't our customers on the podcast, but really recognizing them for what they were doing, where they were selling, how they were bootstrapping their business, all those other kind of things. And that's really, And that's where the podcast, this type of podcast is so cool, because people do want to hear about, how somebody got over a hump or survived a stumbling block or pieced together their business or built their business or whatever. And so all those pieces parts really were part of our philosophy with educating our customers, really, which was what the core of what we were trying to do.
And you talk about partnerships, and that boils down to people. And these long form conversations with your podcast that you had, you get to see the people behind the products and the principles
Correct.
and the ideas. And I think that human stories are really the new, not the new capital, but the capital that can really push humanity into a positive future. When we hear more about the challenges that everybody's experienced, and then we hear the solutions, everybody can benefit from that.
Well, you're spot on with that. I mean, it is an experience, and the one thing I found over my trials and bumps in the road is being willing to fail, being willing to make mistakes. The one thing I try to teach our kids, and something that just came up as recently as last weekend, we told our son, who's a pitcher in high school, going to college on a baseball scholarship, he had a tough outing last weekend. And the feedback we gave him when he was ready to talk was, you're either winning or learning.
Right.
And it's not about losing, it's about learning. So it's, what did you learn? And that's going to be something that I believe is going to carry us forward as a society, as humanity, if you will, because we love the great success stories. We love to hear the people and they have all their things and their stuff and all that. And that's great. Don't get me wrong. But what we don't hear a lot of times is the bumps in the road and the challenges they've had and the mistakes they've made, and being willing to honestly, raise your hand. Yep, screwed that one up. And here's what I learned. Yep, made that same mistake again. Damn it. This is where I'm going. And being willing to fail. And that's kind of where I want to, leave my mark, as well as I know you do, in our world of, it's okay to fail. I'm not saying, go and purposely fail. I'm just saying that try your best. And when things don't work out, there's a learning seed there. There's something that you can learn from. And to be able to run with that and use that, that can benefit humanity and mankind going forward. And as we support each other and accept each other for making mistakes, and I don't care whether it's, horrible mistakes where you've lost your business and you've made it, whatever it may be, or you kind of had to bootstrap and make a pivot, and I've done several. Supporting people through that, Brad, I think ultimately is going to help us as a society, as a world, to be able to kind of, continue to grow and prosper. So few times we hear all the bad stuff. Oh man, did you hear about Brad? You know what? Good for Brad. Brad's still out there kicking. Brad didn't quit. Right. Brad didn't leave. He didn't run away. He stood tall. And, those are the kind of things that I think all of us would appreciate hearing more than we are screwing around worrying about, the mistakes that somebody else made. Does that make any sense? I mean, that's just sort of where that's a philosophy that I really believe in.
Exactly. And it's funny about how I think the more that you learn about anything in life, whether it's business or it's writing, I've written a couple screenplays. I was a banker for 13 years, and now I'm doing podcasting, but I also watch a lot of MMA, like UFC fighting. Yeah. And one of the best fighters in the world is Conor McGregor. And his coach, he wrote a book that was all about you're winning or you're learning. And that was the entire philosophy of the entire book. And so it's success, human success really does apply to every endeavor that we do engage in.
And let's not, for the analogy with Conor McGregor, let's stay with that for a second, because he hasn't won every fight.
Exactly.
He's gotten his nose busted and his lip broken and the whole bit, and he keeps standing up, and he'll own it and go, yeah, I lost that one. Yeah, tried my best. Whether you like him as a person or not, or anything, that's not the point. The point is, we're talking about at this juncture is the fact that he's always learning something and he's willing to try again. And that bodes so well for all of us who need to see that, that this guy didn't quit. Yep, I screwed that one up. Yep, wasn't prepared for this fight. Yep, I made a mistake. I'll be back again tomorrow. That's it. I'm not going to quit.
And
That's it.
And we had Connor Boyack on, and he runs the Libertas Institute in Utah. And their
Yep.
big push this year was to get medical cannabis legalized in Utah, and so
Yep.
that actually passed. And his grandfather told him one time, he said that persistence pays pretty good dividends. So it's an acronym, PPGPD, I think. Persistence pays, and I think that's a good lesson for everybody. And there's not a lot of those old school lessons and that old wisdom that's talked about a lot. And that's part of why I wanted to do the podcast, is talk about the free market principles and also talk about the things that we can do to help us suffer less unnecessarily.
Yep. No, I totally get it. I mean, what you're doing, and I totally buy into it. I mean, I think and the more we communicate, let's face it too, this younger society, everybody's communicating with their phones, everybody's communicating via social. We're missing out on that kind of one-on-one talking to somebody, whether it's through Skype or literally on the phone with somebody, hearing their voice, to be able to share or talk with them. We're so quick to kind of, use the phasers on our phone versus having this. And I'm hoping that you are right, that, this is coming around again. This is something that we'll begin to value, is just that one-on-one. Because I think ultimately that's what's going to play a huge part in as a society, us carrying forward. I think our kids are learning that, and learning the hard way, unfortunately, that the phones and social media and all that kind of stuff, that's great. That's awesome. But it's not the only way to communicate. And, and you have to be able to kind of have a human conversation with somebody, and have that one-on-one. And so few people in this generation, this younger generation, really know how to do that. So, and we try to force our kids, Brad, to make sure, pick up the phone. No, I know you want to send a note. You can follow up with a note. I get it. An email, maybe. Pick up the phone or go over there and talk to them face to face. And that's a lost art, man.
I do see that as well. I think we've been sold a bill of goods to a certain degree about the technology age and about how it was going to end in-person communication, and all of these futurists came out and talked. What are your thoughts about, you talked about going and visiting Daryl, at the Real Salt Mine. And what are your thoughts about business travel and the importance of actually meeting partners and customers in person? I think that's something that still has a lot of value.
Oh, you know what? It does. Not only does it have value, it's something that also has come back. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was this big movement to go to meeting and WebEx and, eliminating the travel. And that really revolutionized our business at the time. And the fact that we were a small operation, I was able to negotiate and work on projects with a company that's in Saginaw, Michigan, or 10 hours away or 24 hours away in Oregon, that I never would before. However, that's not the end all be all. So back to your point and your question, I'm finding that we also have to have that one-on-one. I have to have time to find these people, whether it's meet at a trade show and have a cup of coffee, whether it's go to their factory and visit with them, whether find a way to have a human experience with a particular person, is coming back and is as important today as ever. We tend to want to run away from, it's easy for us to jump on a Skype but you know what? My whole intention is the next time you and I, our paths cross, is to meet face to face and shake hands and have a coffee. Because I think ultimately that's how relationships are built. That's how we can continue on and grow together as human beings. But seeing people face to face, without a doubt, is coming around. It's got to be cost effective, though. That's the other thing I learned the hard way is, we've got to be creative If I'm going to be on the West Coast, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to swing through Redmond, but I'm also going to see 6 or 7 other customers in and around that area over the next couple of days, and make it worth the while versus see one guy and then fly back and say that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's not going away. I really think it's come back. I think that one-on-one human experience is definitely coming back around, and I think it's important for people to really do that.
Definitely, and I think that business travel is way up, and I think that the reason for that is exactly what you talked about: is shaking people's hands, looking in the eye, and actually,
Right.
interacting with people in the real world. How did you get into the packaging business? What got you started in this industry?
It's interesting you mentioned that. I'm actually giving a speech next Tuesday, as a matter of fact. So this is so top of mind. I was asked to kind of give a background on my business and my world, or my life, if you will, kind of an icebreaker. And I was thinking about that as recently as this morning. I got into the business when I graduated from college. I went to school in Bowling Green, which is outside of Toledo, Ohio, State University. Good school, nothing earth shattering. Um, and my first job out of college was selling steel. Now I knew nothing about steel, but it was the first job, and I knew it was going to be a first job, and I knew it wasn't going to be there forever. But in between those jobs, or that job, I should say, I interviewed and I was hired by a bigger packaging company, or a big packaging company, that sold everything to everybody. So for example, this is a national company, and they sold, they may sell you guys toilet paper and paper towels. The next guy, they may sell bubble wrap and boxes. The next guy, they may sell. So I got really indoctrinated into this massive industry of packaging. Um, and at the time, selling packaging, you can go a couple different ways. Just like anything else, you can sell commodities,
Mm-hmm.
but with commodities, you have to really, you're not going to make a lot of money. You're going to basically trade pennies, if you will, and it all comes down to price. And it took me a couple of years to really learn that in order to make a good living in that business, I needed to specialize.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to kind of do something different that not everybody else is willing to do. And for me, it was trying to solve problems. It was trying to get into a company. This is pre-internet, mind you, to be able to kind of get with them and find out where's their pain. Where is their pain at this particular company? Packaging related, of course. And, so some companies, it may be in a lead time for how long their packaging takes to get there. Or some companies, it may be cost. Or some people are running into a situation where their quality is really bad. Or maybe the company they're currently using doesn't return phone calls, or doesn't react or respond quick enough. So it was something that I needed to kind of do and find a niche, and that was really that problem solver philosophy. And that really, it wasn't the product or packaging particular that I was selling. It was solving a problem. So I would really and truly, Brad, I would knock on your door or find a way to get into your factory. And I would really just honestly, if I'm talking to you over the phone or even face to face, where's your pain? And where are the problem areas you're having? Now, if you came back and said, "Oh, everything's great," you and I both know that's nonsense. Everybody's got a problem. Now, it may not be a big, massive, your house is on fire problem, but it may be a problem. And you'd be amazed at how quickly people will tell you, again, back to your human experience, how people will tell you their pain.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, you'll never believe my truck for this stuff was late again, and I missed my shipment to Walmart. Do you know that Walmart bills me $10,000 a day if I'm late on my shipment? Whatever it is. Now it's kind of like, okay, now I'm talking to somebody. So that's really, I got into the business by default because I needed a job in between the steel business. And then it kind of morphed into learning the nuances or the different product types, if you will, in the packaging business. And then I started my own business back in '98. And then really kind of morphed into a couple different other areas, like the stand-up pouches, like some of the other heavy returnable stuff that we've done. But really, the packaging business was something that I stumbled into after I got out of the steel business out of college, and I've kind of stuck with it ever since.
Well, that's great. Now you talk about it being an icebreaker speech. Are you in Toastmasters? Is that where are you
I
working on
am.
it?
As a matter
Yes.
of fact, I am. So I joined. It's interesting you mentioned that. So I joined. I've always heard of and known of Toastmasters, and I've always valued the program.
Hmm.
And just like and I don't know if it's for this podcast or another one, but our business continues to evolve. And I'm at another stage in this business where I feel like I need to educate larger groups of people about what it is that we're able to do, not just with the stand-up pouches, but another segment of our business. And I'm determined to kind of get competent at speaking in public and sharing information with people, and that's so top of mind because that's what I need to do. So I am giving my icebreaker speech next Tuesday, and I was just planning through the whole module and the whole program online. I have a mentor and a coach to teach me these things, but I'm kind of excited. Believe it or not, I'm an introvert at heart. I do not like speaking in public. I'm not. I could fake it very, very well,
Right.
but I don't like to do it. So I'm forcing myself to kind of get into my uncomfort zone, if you will, or uncomfortable zone, and really kind of push it out forward and kind of go from there. Did that make any sense?
It does, definitely. I went through the Toastmasters program as well, and I was very impressed with not only with what they teach you, but it's also the group of people that you meet when you're in there.
Right.
Because these are all
Right.
people who are trying to improve their life. They're trying to improve society in some way. They're trying to get their message out because everybody has a story to tell. And everybody, I
Right.
think, has something to share where, like you talk about, you had pain in your life in one area, and maybe you found a solution for that. And to be able to tell other people about that, I think is really powerful. And there was a quote I think that I read on your website, or it was one of your podcasts, that you said that he who communicates best wins.
Right.
And I think that is so imperative for everything in life, that everybody is always selling, no matter if you're in business as a salesman or in your personal life. There's a
Right.
author that I follow, Grant Cardone, and he's got a book,
Oh yeah.
Sell or Be
Yeah.
Sold. And
Yep.
and he talks about that everything you get in your life is actually a commission. So even your
Right.
friendship or anything that you have, it's all about selling has gotten such a bad word in this country, a lot of times. And I think there's that you talk about, it's more like storytelling. It's more like
Correct.
sharing your ideas and solutions.
Has to be, and it's cool you mentioned that because storytelling is really at the core of giving either a good speech or communicating properly. Let's face it, if I sit here and try to tell you about how great our packaging is and how wonderful we are, that goes in one ear and out the other. However, if I'm able to relate to you in a way that talks to, Brad, have you ever purchased a pound of coffee or maybe your protein powder, and you finally get this bag and it's got a nice handle, and you pick the 5 pounds up and the handle breaks. Has that
Yes.
ever, and now you've got powder all over the floor, or now and then you've got to go back to the store and return it. So talking in terms of a story where somebody can relate to is memorable and something people will value versus me just saying, "Hey, we sell the best stuff in the world and it's so great." And it's telling stories that I think so few people can do properly, and those that do really leave a lasting impression.
They do, and that's what shapes culture and society. And I think that civilization moves forward on the quality of the stories that we're able to share. And that starts at
Right.
the personal level and moves all the way up to the cultural level. And for
Couldn't
folks
agree more.
that don't know about Toastmasters, it's an amazing program. It's been around, I believe, since the 40s or even maybe earlier than that, that teaches practical public speaking skills. And you have a module, competent communicator module that you go through. And the first one is called Icebreaker, where you have to talk
Right.
about yourself. And personally, I found that to be the most difficult of all the speeches.
Well, I can see why, because I on my end as well, because it's I don't think, I mean, people love to talk in a one-on-one basis. Let's face it, I think we can all survive that, but in front of others and people we don't necessarily know is a little daunting. And the other cool thing about Toastmasters, which has impressed me, is it's not so much about, well, I mean, it is if you want to get good at public speaking, if you want to make it a career, and that's great, perfect. But a lot of it is also just having, communication skills, being able to answer a question that on the fly you really, aren't really prepared to. So instead of the judge, we're thinking our way through it and minimizing the ahs and the ums and saying and answering the question and being able to do that competently, I think will pay huge dividends for all of us. And what's cool is that the other philosophy I've got too is I'm seeing so much of the knowledge and information from the older days kind of coming back around. For example, things like Toastmasters. One of the books that continues to be, bursting at the seams is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Isn't it interesting that all of these Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone and all those guys really and truly have their foundation based upon Think and Grow Rich. And who's the other guy? Carnegie.
Right.
Dale Carnegie.
How to Win Friends.
And, and his program and all those kind of things. It's the foundation that all of these newer guys are using. So it just kind of tells me that maybe, and there's nothing wrong with the Grant Cardones and Tony Robbins. I think they're great. But I also really value going back to that old school stuff, and because there's a lot of nuggets in there that really are the foundation of all these modern guys.
I would definitely agree with that, and especially I think there was a book called Self-Help by Samuel Johnson way back in the day in like 1880s, and I think a lot of the stuff goes back to him. And before that, the Romans and the Greeks, and there's a lot of that ancient wisdom about virtue and about how to deal with another human being that I think, like you talk about, is coming back, kind of like the classics in human communication.
It's interesting you mentioned it. I was having lunch with somebody. We were like at a school outing or something like that with the kids. This is 5-6 years ago. And one of the guys that I met there sold books. I mean, like produced and published the books. Oh. So it wasn't like and he wasn't like a HarperCollins or one of these big names. But what he said was, and I never knew this, he said some of the first books that were really popular back in the late 1800s were the self-help books. Mm-hmm. And I never knew that. I just assumed they were something. He said, no, there was this big, huge movement, late 1800s, early 1900s of the self-help books. And I would have never thought that was, and I just thought that was fascinating. I just assumed that it started with like Napoleon Hill, but it'd been going on a lot longer, to your point. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
It has been, and we had on the show Professor Deirdre McCluskey. She's a economics professor from Chicago, and she travels the world talking about economics. She's a free market lady, and she talked about the rise of the bourgeois virtues, which are basically the virtues of the middle class, or the commercial class, as she called it. And that those really started back in the 16th and 17th century, where you had people who were everyday people who finally realized that they could improve their life because they had enough economic freedom to be able to make choices which actually mattered, and they could do that over a long enough period of time to build capital and then to invest that capital into different things to improve their own life. And that self-help movement, I think, is tied directly to the rise of the respect for free market economics and, if you will, the invisible hand of Adam Smith.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, that stuff never goes old. I mean, I love hearing about all that stuff and the philosophy of your program too, because I totally buy into that, 100%. And I think that is a very cool. It's just very cool, and I love hearing those stories.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when you got first started, you talked about knocking on doors, of factories and going to factories, trying to get inside. I think that cold calling is something that is so difficult to do. And it's really, I think, related to getting up and talking in front of people because you're so exposed that it
Right.
feels like it's you against the world kind of a dynamic. How do you view cold calling, and do you still do that today?
You know what? It's never going to go away. I still will cold call. And I remember distinctly there was a period of time when I was working for the national packaging company, and I knew that I needed to survive. I wasn't going to be that guy that was going to keep changing jobs to try to find lightning in a bottle or hit the lottery. So I needed to kind of have that one-on-one with myself to say, I need to get good at this. This cold calling is something I need to get good at. And I remember I took a yellow legal pad, and I'm still a big fan of yellow legal pads, and write down company names and phone numbers. Now, again, this is pre-internet,
Hmm.
and I would take a roll of quarters, and at the time I would go to the gas station or wherever I was at, and they would have the pay phones that were at the car level, at the window level of your car. So I could pull into a gas station and literally park it there for a half hour, making call after call after call of local businesses there. So if anybody answered the phone, Brad, or if somebody said, yeah, that's interesting, great, I'll be right there. That's kind of how we did it. And I remember I got good at just asking people about themselves. I found to this day, I use the line, I know you don't know me from a hill of beans. And people generally kind of take that as disarming. And I said, I'm just calling because more than anything, I value your business and I'd love to be able to kind of introduce our business to your company. And it just talk to people like humans, right?
Hmm.
And I got really good at it. It didn't mean that I sold a ton or but I got in the door, and I was able to really kind of, once that door was open, a slither, I was able to kind of break it open. Cold calls are never going to go away. I think there's things now that people can try to dodge us from. Again, they live in the voicemails,
Right.
and everything goes to some sort of a gatekeeper. Um, but I still think we have to be prepared and willing to, as salespeople, as business owners, or whatever it is, to be prepared to talk to somebody, whether it's a cold call or a face to face or in a parking lot, to be able to kind of clearly give your spiel in that 20, 30 seconds right out of the gate. So it's not going to go away. It never will. But now it's the game, the field has changed a little bit. But no, to answer your question, it's, I still do it. I still have to do it. I think we all have to do it in one way, shape, or form.
And my grandfather, he sold vacuum cleaners for Electrolux for over 50 years, and he was literally a door-to-door salesman. That he would
Yep.
knock on doors and do that. And I think the courage that it takes to do cold calls is so undervalued. And Deidre McCluskey, she talked about the commercial courage that people have to take those risks and put it out there, that the folks who work maybe behind the scenes in a company and don't interface directly with sales, they might not see the value and actually the difficulty in that process.
Oh, it's, let's face it, it's a huge, getting your teeth kicked in, figuratively, not figuratively, but knocking on someone's door, selling a newspaper subscription, or trying to collect and sell raffle tickets for your kid's baseball team. All those things is a type of cold call,
Hmm.
and to have the door closed on you, or not even opened, or told no, or yelled at.
Right.
People are weird, man,
Yes.
some of the stuff and trying to explain and try to just kind of stay strong and go, wait a minute, I'm going to keep going on, because right outside, and you know this as well as I do, Brad, generally right outside of the last no that you got is a yes.
Right.
So, and to keep plugging forward, even though the last four guys have said no, you keep going forward until you get a yes and not quit. And again, continue to learn. Am I saying something wrong? Is my message clear? Do they understand what I'm trying to do? Are they aware that they don't have to pay me right now? Are they aware that, whatever it is? And, so if you're not, back to one of the first things we talked about, if you're not winning, you're learning. Right. So, learning something is so key, and it's so important. And so it's a tough road to hoe.
And that's something that is not taught in school. A lot of these things that actually are useful in real life. And I think selling and storytelling are some of the most important aspects, and how to be a good friend as well. I think a lot of times we talk about networking, that, people will say your net worth is your network. But I think in reality, it's your ability to form friendships and connections in that way. And also to be able to sell in a way that you are very self-aware of yourself. You're not just having this robotic pitch every time and just hammering people with it, that you're actually, I think salesmen are some of the most self-aware people, and business owners especially, because they have to constantly adapt and to change and improve so they can grow their business and improve their life.
It's totally agree. And sitting across from somebody or on the phone with somebody or whatever it may be, I don't know where I picked this up from, but it works. And to sit across from somebody initially and go, Brad, before I start about me, and a little bit about my background, how can I help you? Who can I introduce you to that maybe could benefit you? Maybe there's a contact I've got for a future guest on your podcast, or maybe there's a guy that I can introduce you to that sells microphones or lighting or whatever it may be. Right. Just be thinking about ways that I could possibly help you. That's very disarming. And that's it's a very good way for somebody to kind of take that really level the playing field when you're having a conversation with somebody where it's, some is the buyer and you're the seller, and to be able to kind of come up and say, how can I help you? It looks like you're having a tough day. I can come back. I can, what? We don't even have to talk about business if you don't want. We can just chat about the ball game. If it looks, maybe the guy just had an argument with his wife. Maybe, his kids are sick. I don't know. But when we talk to a human and we're able to talk to them as humans going, man, that really sucks. I'm sorry your kids have the flu. You know what? You don't need to hear from me today. I'll give you a buzz next time in town. And people remember that. People value that. And I think that if I could impart that to anybody, it's that human experience like you're all about, but being able to truly talk to somebody and be human, for crying out loud. Tell me about yourself first before I take up the rest of it. Tell me about you. I want to know about what makes you tick. And that, I think, is a lost art. And I think a lot of people don't know how to handle that. But I guarantee you I leave an impression when I start that way. I guarantee you people are like, who the hell is this guy? But I'm honest about it. It's not fluff and it's not BS. I really want to hear about them. Now, I know I'm not going to be best friends with them forever, and I'm certainly not going to, see them, tomorrow or whatever it is. But I'm real, and it's those kind of little things. The other thing too, which is I'm a huge fan of too, Brad, and so few people do it, and it's coming back, is the handwritten note, the handwritten, hand-stamped note with a non-machine stamp that says, you know what, Brad, I'm grateful for us taking the time. I really enjoyed our time together. Now, you'd be amazed, because so few people do it, you would be amazed at how many times, at least a dozen times over my career, I've gone back into somebody's office from 10 years ago, and they still have the note
Wow.
or a note or something that somebody took the time to write to them and say something that's goes against the grain, thinking of them. And it doesn't take much. And it's those kind of things that leave that lasting impression that really does basically kind of bring together that whole human experience.
And you talk about with your Toastmasters and going back to kind of the old school ways of saying things. What are you hoping to accomplish with that, with getting your wider message out to more people? Is it more of a philosophical message, or is it about how your products can help them in their companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. A little bit of actually both.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I look at this as as two ways. One, the business side of things, because a portion or a segment of our business has really taken off and expanding, and I want to share that. The other thing, if you really ask me what makes me come alive, it's this. It's encouraging people. And you'd be amazed. I'm 55 years old. You'd be amazed at how many people I come across with that think this is it. You get into that middle age,
Mm-hmm.
and this is it.
Right.
10
years.
You
from
don't have a
retirement.
choice to change your life. You can't change the trajectory. You're done. And I totally think that's nonsense. And there's so many people that have been bumped and kicked around. And I look at this as the next chapter. I look at this as another stepping stone to the next 20, 25 years of our lives. And I'd be foolish to sit here and say that it was over. And I want to encourage people. I want to encourage people to take chances. I want to encourage people to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that's what makes me come alive. Now, I sit here and I think about this stuff, whether I'm writing and journaling in the morning or whether I'm out and about. It's what makes me come alive. I just think, I'm not ever going to be a Tony Robbins, and I'm not ever going to be any professional along those lines. But you know what? I can encourage other people to pick themselves back up, or buy them a cup of coffee when they're down, or totally change the mojo that somebody's got that's having a really tough time. And we don't have to look very far. We see it all the time.
Right.
Yes, there's human tragedy that happens throughout the world and globally. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't take much to see a neighbor that's down on his luck, or somebody that lost their job, and it's a very public loss. And we've got a friend that's in the public sector here in Cleveland that's going through a very, very tough situation where he's being accused of something that's I don't really care. I don't even know whether it's true or not, and it's not a criminal thing. But the point is, it's very public,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't take much for somebody to reach out to him and just say, you know what, Ken, I'm thinking about you. If you want a coffee, you want to go have a beer, you want lunch, I'm not afraid to be seen with you. And that's what makes me come alive. And that's really kind of where I want to be able to share that with other people. And who knows where that goes, Brad,
Right.
but that's just something that my gut tells me. So it's a little bit of both, to answer your question.
Well, that's great. Now, as far as with your business goes, are you involved in the day-to-day operations? Are you there every day, still driving the ship and making those decisions? Because I think as a CEO, people don't really realize is that those thousands of decisions that you make every day stop with you. And I think that
Right.
a lot of people who've always been an employee and have not really taken those risks or taken that responsibility, a lot of times, if you make a mistake as an employee, well, your boss will fix it or somebody else will
Right.
fix it. Or if you made
Right.
a bad choice, there's a buffer between that decision and the reality that the
Right.
consequences are. But as a CEO, you're much more exposed when you do make a decision like you talked about that could be a mistake.
Look, everything still comes down to me.
Mm-hmm.
I sign the checks,
Mm-hmm.
even though we have a CFO and some other things. Let's face it, it stops with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fortunate that I have staff underneath me that can allow me to kind of handle what I need to handle from the different facets of the business. Maybe it's accounting, maybe it's sales, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's these kind of things. But I also have staff that can run with a project and kind of bring it to fruition.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I don't think there's ever a day that I don't care whether I'm running a 500 person company or a 15 employee company. Everything's still going to come to somebody's desk. It's always going to stop at some place. And yes. So to answer your question, yes, everything still kind of falls on my lap.
I got you. And now, how do you handle that with your employees? Do you actively try to motivate folks, or do you apply those same principles that you're looking to apply outside of the business within the business as well?
There's a bunch of philosophies with that. I mean, there's a program called the Entrepreneur Operating System, or EOS. And there was a gentleman that wrote a book called Traction. That's all part of it. And so much of it is a philosophy of having regular updates and check-ins and having regular conversations with your superior, if you will, or your direct report.
Hmm.
How are you doing? What's going on? Are you struggling with anything? Do you need help with something? So a lot of that has to do with, a regular, I'm in touch with pretty much everybody on a regular basis throughout the company, whether it's directly or indirectly. I mean,
Hmm.
what I'm doing, between Slack and instant messaging, emails, of course, obviously text messages. We're all connected no matter where in the country we are. And a lot of my staff are spread out throughout the country,
Oh, okay.
and we're all connected.
Hmm.
So, and to be able to kind of stay in touch with those people and have weekly check-in calls, which is what we do every Tuesday at 9:15 in the morning, is we have a weekly check-in with my main direct reports. So I know what's happening underneath them. Where are the problems? Who's giving us an issue? Is there something I need to get involved in? If not, great, super. It's a quick call. But if I need to, we need to brainstorm something, then I'll sit there and go through it. So it's really kind of a combination. It's having a regular rhythm to a
Hmm.
meeting, having a regular meeting that everyone knows, come hell or high water. We're going to have that Tuesday at 9:15 meeting, but also really keeping in touch on a regular basis, and just knowing that, if you need me, call me.
Gotcha. And I think that that's important too. And I look at it this way. I was an employee most of my life, and that every employee is really a CEO for their own life in a certain respect as well. And that the decisions you make do ultimately fall back on you. But within the company, there is that one guy or one lady who that goes to, who has to sign those checks or to make those
Right.
decisions. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
something that's not really talked about a lot of times. That we'll talk about CEOs of these giant corporations, but I think a business owner who's also the CEO, it's a different job.
Totally. Without it, it's not for everybody either,
Hmm.
Brad.
Right.
And and if it's not for, again, some people get into this and go, I want nothing to do with it.
Right.
For me, I don't know if I could ever go back to a regular job working for somebody else.
Hmm.
It's not that I'm so good at it or I'm super smart. It's just that this fits me. I would rather run with it and have the buck stop with me,
Hmm.
and be able to kind of handle that, because I know at the end of the day, if I got to work all weekend to fix it, I'll work all weekend. Go ahead,
Right.
punch me in. So and so left, and all right, it looks like I got to do it. So I just know, because I can always trust me,
Hmm.
to get it done, no matter what it takes. And I think that people see that and
Yep.
value that.
And lead by example. I think that's a very
Correct.
important part, definitely. Now, you've mentioned a few books like Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, this book
Yeah.
Traction, which I wasn't familiar with, but I'll definitely check that out. Is there any
Yeah.
books that you
You know what? Gino Wickman, he's a good man. He's a good guy.
Gino, okay, gotcha. Is there any other books that you go to for inspiration or motivation? You say you journal every morning. Do you also set aside time each day to read, or is that like a weekly thing that you do?
Oh, no, you know what? I was told a long time ago, and I totally believe it, that as we get older, using our brain is so critical.
Hmm.
So one of the things I do from the first thing I get up and is in regardless of where I'm at in the world, whether it's in China visiting our factories, whether it's I'm visiting Redmond Minerals and I'm in a hotel room, is I get up about an hour before I'm supposed to do anything, and I read, I journal, I pray. I just kind of get that lays the foundation for what I'm doing throughout the day. Um, it's crazy. I probably have about 15 books I read on a regular basis. I mean, they're just bits and pieces. But one of the books that I strongly recommend is, and I love this. And I found this guy because he wrote a book that was totally really bizarre and a wild. Did you remember and it became a movie called The Legend of Bagger Vance?
Yeah, I remember that movie. Yeah.
Okay. So it was in it, and again, the book is really, really solid. It's about golf per se, but really underneath all of that is about life.
Hmm.
There's so many philosophies about life. So this author's name is Stephen Pressfield, and he has written a book called, and that kind of, for whatever reason, I went back and I reread The Legend of Bagger Vance because there's just a lot of, the messaging is very clear. You just don't quit. You keep plugging forward. Even though everything's going bad, you keep going. Whatever. But he wrote a book called The War of Art.
Hmm.
Now, it's not the art of war, it's the war of art. And what makes it fascinating to me that I think you and your listeners will appreciate it is it's all about the resistance we all feel. He's a writer at heart. And his whole story was it took him 20, 30 years to get a book published, to get a screenplay accepted and paid for. So this guy had odd jobs throughout the country, driving trucks and, I mean, waiting tables. I mean, this guy was a struggling writer. The point is there was this inherent resistance that we all face at time that says, you know what, Brad, start tomorrow. You're okay. Go, take it easy. Go ahead and take that nap on the couch.
Right.
You know what? Next week is a good time for you to start writing that book that you wanted to do. And it's that resistance that we all fall prey to, and that we all kind of, and I don't know why, and he's not saying why we have it, but we do. But it's something that we all need to work through, and we all need it. Now, it's not about, and it was that core thing, whether it's you writing screenplays or me going to Toastmasters to start to tell my story. There's things that we have to face that really inherently make us scared.
Hmm.
It's that resistance that says, better try that later. It's okay. You don't want to go out and do that now. But you know what? Well, it's what it is it's a message that we have to do it. We have to live our life's purpose. And that book, The War of Art, was just, it's profound, man. And it's very cool because he's a very good, it's stuff that you and I can relate to.
Hmm.
And I just think that all of us have that resistance that's inherent in us, that we have to fight through in order to get to the other side. Does that make sense?
It does, definitely. I think there is that resistance. And he was out on the Joe Rogan podcast. I don't know
Yeah.
if you watched Joe Rogan
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
And he was talking about that. That's a great episode. And that book, I highly recommend it to folks as well, The War of Art. And you talk about that resistance when you feel that. And I think with sales, that resistance, you get maybe used to getting through that a little bit more. But everybody has that resistance in some area of their life, whether it's their health or their diet or the relationship they haven't addressed as well.
Right. And there's something that I try to teach our kids and I try to remind myself of is it's tiny little steps, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
We get so caught up in trying to swing for the fences and hit a grand slam. But you know what? You win a lot of baseball games with just hitting singles.
Right.
And if I can give myself a break and say, today's going to be a great day if I, make 3 cold calls. Maybe I get through to nobody, but I've made the effort, or I work on my icebreaker speech for Toastmasters today, and continue forward on that. So I'm facing my fears, or maybe you finally submit your screenplay to somebody to proof it for you, and you put yourself out there, whatever it may be. That's a little step, and that's all it takes, because so many, myself included, especially me, I always think I have to make this monumental seismic jump from point A to point P, or what? No, it's point A to point B. Just make a little step, and after 30 days, of course, you made 30 steps. So, but we're so quick on that. We all want that quick fix. We all want that quick home run, because we've seen it happen one time in our life before, and we think that's the way it doesn't work. And until I started to really accept that, my life was always start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. So
I've experienced that as well for me. Yeah, definitely. Is that you have these grand visions of what you want to accomplish, and then you go after it, and you might exceed your grasp. You might try too much. And that the idea of the concept of the flow state, there's a book called Flow, is that you want to exceed just beyond your current abilities. And that when your body and mind are engaged in that and you're striving just a little bit further, I think our machinery, our biological machinery is built for that. And then you have all those positive neurochemicals that kick in when you're in that path.
Big time. Another old book that's come around too that I totally forgot about that I just recently picked back up is Psychocybernetics. I don't know if you know Dr. Maxwell Maltz. It's old school back there in the days of Napoleon Hill. But I'll tell you, it's all about our self-image. It's all about, unless we really are comfortable in our own skin, unless we are very, aware that we're gonna constantly shoot ourselves in the foot. Our self-image and what we truly believe about ourselves. Is it possible for me to hit a grand slam, against Roger Clemens? Probably not. But you know what? Do I believe I could get up there and swing and take a few hacks? Yeah, I do. Now, that doesn't mean it's ever going to happen, but my self-image is so important. And Psychocybernetics is one of those old school ones too. I think people should totally kind of circle back on. It's a great book.
I would recommend that as well, because he talks about the unconscious, or what he termed the subconscious, I believe. And I've been reading a lot about Carl Jung's work and the idea of individuation and about following your own path, and how powerful we have. It feels like we're different people at different moments in time, because we have the unconscious and we have all these other forces involved. And that to put a stamp on who you want to become or who you think you are, I think is important, at least to have a foundation for moving out into the unknown.
Well, and what I thought was really cool too is, at the core, for everyone's benefit who doesn't know about the book, Dr. Maxwell Maltz was a plastic surgeon, and this is back in the early days of plastic surgery. And people would come to him, obviously, in a car accident or maybe a cleft palate or something like that for surgery. But he also started getting a lot of people coming to him for, my nose is too big, or my ears are too big. And he would say, your ears are, he would say that, again, your ears are perfectly fine. It's what you've been telling yourself that, so, and the point is that, he could go and do surgery, but a lot of times people would go, they've told themselves that their ears are too big for so many years that they actually believe it. And they can look at themselves with different ears and go, there's no change. And it was all about the self-image. It was all about the, what they've been ingrained, that's what been ingrained in their lives for so many years. And to be able to break through that is as simple as, if we can tie our shoes, was one of the time, and if we can build upon one success that we're able to do, we can build upon and create that new connection in our brain that says, yes, I can do that. And if I could just tie my shoes, then I can basically begin to kind of chart my path in a new direction, because I've done something positive and going in that different direction. So it's a pretty cool book.
Definitely. I'm going to reread that too, because I haven't read that for a long time, but I like the idea of because a lot of times we think that next thing is going to make us happy, that's going to
Correct.
fundamentally change how we feel about ourselves. But in reality, every goal that you have is going to be replaced by another goal eventually. And so
Correct.
being uncomfortable during the striving, being uncomfortable in the unknowing that exists
Right.
when you're trying to create something new for yourself.
Without a doubt. I think and it's coming back around, man. I just find it so interesting that these old books are coming back around because that's the philosophy. I mean, one of the what do you call it? The reviews or the is Tony Robbins. That was one of his first books that he read. And again, whether you like him or not, he's all over the internet, all over the web. But I found that interesting. Some of the key things that he read back when he was starting his whole business was, like Think and Grow Rich and
Mm-hmm.
also Psychocybernetics, which I think is pretty cool.
I like to read the old books because I think
Yep.
they don't have the modern. And to be honest with you, I think it's the Marxist type of identity politics and the postmodernism, that philosophy that has crept into even those type of books. And I think the older you
I
go back,
100% agree.
the better. Are
I
you
agree.
familiar with Jordan Peterson's work at all? The 12 Rules for Life. Have you read that yet? I found that very
No.
helpful, very interesting. That he's going back to the really old concepts, like you were talking about the ideas that have been tried and true from the beginning of humanity, basically based on our biology. He's a psychologist, and he's a lecturer, and I really found the book very interesting. And one of the things he talks about is that we shouldn't be in love with the knowledge that we currently have. We should be in the love of the knowledge that we don't have yet. And he's like,
Yes.
that's exactly what you're talking about, is focusing on growing and getting to the next step.
You got it. And that's Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, Jordan. Yeah, Dr. Jordan
All right.
Peterson. Yeah,
Yep. I
12
wrote it
Rules for
down.
Life. And he's got another
I'll get
book.
it when we're done.
He's got excellent. He's got another book called 12 More Rules for Life that's going to be coming out soon. And one of those rules, which actually inspired me to do the podcast, was that pick one thing and try to do the best you can on it and see what happens. And so
There
that's
you
kind
go.
of the philosophy where I'm
Love
going
it.
with.
I
But
love it.
but David, thank you for being on the show, man. I really appreciate your time. A lot of great information, a lot of great inspiration. And good luck with Toastmasters, man. I think that's going to pay off dividends for you in the future. And we'd love to have you back on later in the future and talk about your experience with Toastmasters, where your business is growing, and how you see these old values coming back into vogue.
Man, I'll help you 100%. I'm happy to come back anytime. And remember what I said before, too. How can I help you? So just keep that in mind, whether it's online or offline. How can I help you? Who can I introduce you to? And I mean that. So it's been a pleasure and an
Fantastic.
honor. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, David. And thank you, everybody, for listening today. And we will see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.